Chris, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, I'm excited, Lisa. This is my first podcast, so first for everything. Yeah.
I can't believe I get to do anything first with you.
First thing. So I'm excited. So thanks for having me today.
Well, I mean, it's a true honor because I have respected you in this business for a long time, and the fact that you're here to share some of your wisdom with us is really, really a really full honor.
Sure, some will be good advice and some won't be so good, but we'll do our best today in our 30 or 40 minutes, okay?
I bet it'll be interesting.
Yeah, interesting it will be, I promise.
Yeah, so when you were a little boy, did you say, I want to be a commercial real estate broker, investor, owner?
No, not really. My dad was in the Air Force, flew in Vietnam and was a pretty decorated pilot, very decorated. Pilot of the Year, I think, in '85. Saved lives and so
like Top Gun
yeah,
kind of thing?
not quite. Well, actually, he was. He broke some records in the Air Force in terms of G forces, but he was a fighter pilot instructor, and he went to an airline called Northwest, which is now Delta here locally, and so from whenever I could remember, he was, you're going to be a pilot, you're going to be a pilot, you're going to be a pilot. So I ended up going to St. Thomas Academy locally here and down in Mendota Heights, and I went up to the Harvard of the Midwest, the University of North Dakota, and it's pretty cold up there. So,
and it's a big aviation school, right?
Yeah, that's why it's good. There's not many trees to run into, so it's really flat and really cold. So it's a great spot for if you're a young student to learn. If you have to put the plane down, you can land it literally anywhere. But and that's true. And the water up there, and what do they say? A woman behind every tree up there. So it's an interesting spot up in Grand Forks, North Dakota. But anyways, when I got done, I got through the program, Lisa. And
so you flew?
I flew. I got my commercial real estate license. I got instrument. I was actually an instructor like my dad. So, but when I graduated, I was aviation and communications degree, but all my friends were business. And either their dads were in business or uncles and so on. But my grandfather was a janitor, and my grandfather worked for the state doing a tax accounting and never went to college. And so just didn't have that family business background. And so, but I remember when I decided I might want to get a third degree, and I was going to go to St. Thomas College and get an MBA. My dad said, us Simmonses, we're not business people, and which was interesting. It was a little bit of a challenge. And then I did get selected to be in the Air Force and fighter pilot and for them. And I would still probably be in the Air Force today. 160 applicants down to 16, down to 4, down to me. And I rescinded my flight spot, and it crushed my dad because he had thought, that was my way. And but I remember telling him, Dad, I don't want to fly the airplanes. I want to own the airline. And he laughed. So anyway,
I love that.
So that's kind of how I got out of that. But then started taking some business classes down at Mankato State, now Minnesota State, I think they call it. And that was okay. That wasn't too hard for me. And then I was talking to some friends. I got a job, a business job, selling at Pitney Bowes, selling mail metering machines. Really exciting. So I was always talking to the office manager at all these companies, and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. And I was told I was really good at it, but I was selling, again, mail metering machines. And then a friend of mine goes, you should do commercial real estate. And I'm like, what's that? And they're like, oh, it's great. You should talk to your friend Peter Mork. And you probably know Lisa Peter. And
I do.
He lives here in Edina, and I think it's the second biggest industrial owner in Minnesota. But at the time, he was a senior when I was a freshman. So I sat down and had what we call informational interviews, kids, and that's what you should do to get into business, because you kind of figure out industrial office, all the different product types. And he was an industrial guy. And I remember he said, hey, Little Simmons, or whatever the hell he called me at the time, but he said, hey, industrial's great because, you could be with a huge asset manager flying in from New York or Boston, and you have to be dressed in a suit and really prim and proper. And then the next day, you could be meeting with the widget maker, and the guy has no teeth, and he's swearing at you and telling you to get the hell out of his space. And he goes, but one thing that kept in my mind was every day is going to be different. And in real estate, every day is different. Sometimes it's fire drills, sometimes good things, sometimes bad things, but it wasn't going to be what I thought I would have been in aviation, which is a glorified bus driver, flying a plane from point A to point B and then back, and working and getting a union salary along the way. But that's kind of your life, a glorified bus driver. And definitely commercial real estate was, and I got that, just those things Peter said about every day's crazy, and those two examples got me kind of excited. So next thing I know, I was in the industry. So.
Wow. And so where was your first job in commercial real estate?
Yeah, so there's a company called Welsh Companies that probably went the way of the dinosaur maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I started with them in '94. I was 24 years old, and in 22, 23 working at Pitney Bowes, and then so I had a little bit of sales experience, but again, selling meal metering machines in the back of an office. And so I didn't even know where Southdale is in Edina. And so for people around the country that don't know Southdale, it's the #1 retail trade area in Minnesota.
And the first enclosed mall.
Yeah, first 1956. You're right. First enclosed mall, and we're the highest sales at the Galleria, which is in Minnesota for overall retail sales. But anyways, I didn't even though I lived in town, I was in St. Paul side, which
St. Paul's a whole other place.
Well, yeah, I always say St. Paul's like a small Milwaukee, and Minneapolis is like a small Chicago. They're completely different. All the Irish and Catholics over on that side, and Looney Lutherans on the Minneapolis side. Obviously, I'm being pretty general, but I never came over to Minneapolis, and so I had this job, and I got interviewed by John Johansson, and he
interviewed you.
He did. He'll say to this day I interviewed him because I went in and I didn't want the job, and then so he sold me to work for him, which he thought I did some Jedi mind trick from Star Wars, but he offered me the job in probably 20 minutes, and he thought I'd again done something really weird. But I guess I didn't know commercial real estate, so I didn't want to do retail. I wanted to do industrial. That Peter Mork had told me how fun it was, and all of a sudden I'm thinking enclosed malls. But I remember the story, Bob Pounds, and so he ran the property management at Welsh at the time, and I have been telling him that morning, no, I don't want to be a retail broker, because I was thinking enclosed malls, little candy stores or little boutiques, and I was thinking I want to be an industrial guy, Clear Heights. And so I did the buzzwords. Bob, I want to do a profession with Clear Heights and loading docks. And he goes, okay, smartass. And he goes, what does Target, Home Depot, Circuit City, and all these other guys have? And I go, Clear Height and loading docks. And because I hadn't thought of retail that way, this big box stuff.
Right.
And so he goes, great, I'll see you in a half an hour for your interview with John Johansson. And so I came in again. You just don't know anything when you're a kid, right? And a 23-year-old kid that had been exposed to business or commercial real estate, but I had a great upbringing with my parents and gone to decent schools, and so it was just something you had to learn the lingo and a different product type, and I was very fortunate to get hooked up with a mentor. And I think for any product type you get into, industrial, office, land, multifamily, which is apartments, retail, of course, what we're talking about right now, I think that having a good mentor or someone you can trust that teaches you the right way of doing business it really gives you not only a leg up, but almost guarantees you some level of success. And if you're with somebody that's not as scrupulous or on the backside of their career, a couple of years left, but maybe was a big deal 20, 30 years ago, you're not going to learn that much, because you learn by making mistakes, Lisa, as you know, and especially a kid that didn't even know where Southdale trade area was. I made a lot of mistakes, and so it was just, again, fun.
Well, and our industry isn't like, here's this, training program that takes you from step A to step B. It's like, here's a desk and a phone, and
literally back then it was, and not to be like an old grandpa, like we used to complain about, but I guess we're old grandpas at this point. I don't want to be a grandpa yet, so kids don't have kids yet, because I got a couple 20-year-olds now. But anyways, but we had a phone, and we didn't have a computer, and there wasn't cell phones or smartphones. Some people that had a lot of money might have had a brick cell phone that was plugged, like hardwired into your car, and those guys were or gals were the movers and shakers back in the 90s. And then by late 90s, we had the Nokia flip phones, and then we got into all these other things, and now we're on the iPhone 300 or something like right now, BlackBerry.
I miss my BlackBerry.
And so, so technology, but getting back there was a desk and a phone, and you kind of had to, if you're prospecting for a space, you have when I say in a shopping center, you had a vacancy, and then you sit there and you look at what you have in there and what you might miss, and you might be missing at the time, a candy store. So at the time, back in the 90s, Fannie Farmer. So you would call the Fannie Farmer person and look them up on the phone number if you had to do it that way, or talk to somebody that might know who the Fannie Farmer real estate representative was to say, hey, look at the shopping center, and they might say, yeah, it's a dump and I'm not interested, or they might be interested, and then you show them space. But yeah, lots of great stories as it relates to that. But yeah, it was just, the business is a lot different. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but that's how you learn too. You had to think and figure out what are the missing categories within that shopping center. And
so were you doing landlord work then?
Yeah, I think I started out doing landlord work. I think they called us runners. Now it was brokers in training, and I think in this new woke world, there's probably something elevated in terms of a title. But so I just kind of run around. I mean, literally grabbing his coffee, going to get plans, dropping off plans, getting aerials. Now you can do Google Earth and just, there you have it. And before, you'd have to go and get a book and go look it up at somebody's office, and then go to Kinko's, which is no longer around, but FedEx, and get that out. And remember, we'd have to put little arrows and scratch them off, and now everything's electronic. But no, I mean, it was just that type of stuff, like grunt work. And but then you learn the trade areas, you learn Maple Grove, not only where they were, but every shopping center, and after that, every space that might be available. And then you start reading the newspapers about ones that might come available, like reading about a tenant that's about to go bankrupt, and then saying, oh, who can I put into that? But to answer your question, yeah, it started off with landlord work, was fortunate working with, again, Welsh companies at the time. I would observe my boss, John, and he would go on tours with Sears, Office Depot, Circuit City. Half these guys are bankrupt now. But anyways, at the time, they were the big deal. And Linens and things. God, what other company? Maybe he's the one that brought those companies down. I'm not sure. But he represented a lot of them when went bankrupt. But it was fun. So I'd learned how the jingle when he was, coming down the street and say, this is a space available. This is going to be redeveloped. He seemed to he knew every owner and every property. So that was what a tenant rep broker did. So Home Depot flies in, he gets them in the car, might be there for a day, 2, 3 days, maybe touring the Dakotas, maybe it's just the Twin Cities Metro. But you're going to find the best locations. And I learned, how competitive it was, because Lowe's and Menards, and at the time Builders Square had brokers in town, and they were touring too, trying to find the best Builders Square, Menards, or even Knox, if you remember them, locations. And so, it was highly competitive, but, for a little monkey like me in the back seat, squirrely, handing Mr. Johansson the files up front and the tour books. It was an education, but on the landlord side, it was good too, because I worked with a pretty good team, and I was fortunate enough to work with Ryan Companies in the 90s, where they did a lot of Target and Cub and Rainbow anchored shopping centers. And then I worked with Opus late 90s, early 2000s up in Maple Grove, the Arbor Lakes trade area, doing 2 or 3 of their projects. So big box leasing, understanding how to lay out buildings on paper. Being there from the front ends, talking about the different tenants and where they might be in the co-tenancy that they might require to go into it. So it was fun to learn from the best and brightest. And so Ryan Companies is Bill McHale, kind of a legend there. Semi-retired right now, and even doing some work with Kelly Doran, which is, again, another legend here a little more locally. And then Tim Hernan was, unbelievable. He's now the CEO at Opus, was just great. And so for a kid, again, snot-nosed kid in the 20s, it was great for that first 6 years to understand, how the best and brightest landlords work and / developers. And then, again, John Johansson is probably the best tenant rep broker I've ever met. So it was good.
Amazing. And you're responsible for bringing a lot of names that people frequent to the Twin Cities. I mean, you're repping all kinds of tenants, and that's primarily what you do as a broker today, correct?
Yeah, So I worked with about 20 different tenants and did the rollouts and my first rollout was probably Einstein Bagels, and there's a few left in there, but I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I was doing that, and then Caribou Coffee. They had 16 locations, and I think Julie Willett, when she left, told me I did 220 of them. So, I mean, even a guy not bright like me, after doing 220 Caribous, you'd probably learn something. And then did some Boston markets, and that just kind of fed on itself. And then you start getting I guess a local and a regional name, and then lastly a nationals, where then the Total Wine or Bob's or Ultas of the world that I worked with Ulta was probably my first big box I got to work with in the late 90s, and I still didn't know anything, but that was my first box. And then that one, I got PetSmart, then I ended up, hey, who's this kid in Minneapolis? And I picked up Total Wine and picked up, Bob's and then some others, but yeah, and you just kind of work on it. I really do enjoy doing the tenant rep because it's competitive. There's always another, if it's Caribou, then there's another broker for Dunkin' and another broker for Starbucks and one for, a local guy like Dunn Brothers. And we're all trying to compete for that drive-through on the AM side of the road. And Total Wine's probably a little bit different, but when there was PetSmart, you had Petco. And so, if the new development's happening, you're both getting in there trying to say, oh, get my deal done. Because if you don't get your deal done, you don't get paid. I mean, anything. And so, yeah, it is competitive. And some of it's getting in first, some of it's introducing, some of it's relationship, or do you know the people? And other ones are getting your guy in town to approve the deal. Getting Mr. PetSmart on a plane. There's not a Mr. PetSmart, by the way, but getting the real estate manager to come in so that he can be an advocate internally at a PetSmart, an Ulta, Total Wine, fill in the blank. That, and then being able to tell that developer or owner, hey, we got a deal, the deal that we met with on site or the deal we met with at a conference or on a phone, we have a deal, and so they can be assured that it's going to move into a committee, then a lease is going to be generated and they can get some rent, and that's why we're in this business. But yeah, no, it's been an interesting kind of road. But yeah, tenant rep is, I started kind of landlord and did a little bit of tenant rep because I'd only do the little things because John was doing all the big ones. And but I like doing little ones because they're high paced and I'm pretty ADHD. So I think they call it ADD now. But and I'm dyslexic and I'm a little nuts. But anyways, so I like doing all the little deals. I was like a little rabbit, just or a squirrel running around. So
I love it.
Yeah, I got those deals done, but you learn again repetition, and then you kind of get your own brand too, right? And so John, pretty smooth talker, right? That's the guy I started with, and pretty measured. Done huge deals, developer, well thought of, captain of the Badgers, 2-time national champion in hockey, that type of stuff. Well, I didn't have any of that, but I had, I guess, tenacity and being a little squirrely and people learning not to say no because I kept on asking,
I love it so much.
So anyways, that was kind of like how I kind of got started with that.
So when did you start thinking that you might want to be a Ryan and do your own development?
Well, I don't want to be a Ryan because it's a whole different deal.
Okay.
That's like a full service, full service developer, and huge. Been around 50, 100 years or whatever it is. But no, I wanted to. I think right when I was 27, so not too much into the business. I was driving around with Kinko's again. Now it's FedEx for everybody that doesn't know these things. Because again, we're getting old in the tooth. They're long in the tooth. But anyways, I was driving around with them up in St. Cloud, and there was a Mr. Donut for sale. That was the name of the building before it went kaput. But it said for sale on it, and my client, it was next to a Walgreens and a CVS in one corner, Walgreens on the other, and a Lund's on the other, 25th and Division, and you know it well up there. And he goes, well, go buy that. And I'm like, and do what? In my mind, I didn't say that, but in my mind, I was like, how the heck am I going to do a development? I'm not making hardly any dough. I'm still doing this industry.
Right.
So then John brought me into the office. Oh, yeah, I'll teach you how to do it, because he had done Cub Foods, which is a local grocery store discount, but they're $60,000. They're kind of in Minnesota. One of the dominant ones. He'd done a couple Cubs, and he'd done a couple Circuit City centers in Ridgedale and Southdale, and he'd done some power centers. 500,000 square feet or so out in Modesto, California. And anyways, he was very entrepreneurial, but I'm just learning the tenant rep business and the landlord business. And now all of a sudden he's going to teach me the development business. So we sat down and he had me do everything, and he was hard on me being, because he always liked making fun
what
of me.
What a gift, North Dakota,
but he sat down and we went through the pro forma, and I didn't know what one of those were, and spreadsheets. I'm still not good at those, he'd say. But anyways, we got that done, and so we're just proving up costs. This is what the building costs. This is what the TIs, so what we're expected to do for Caribou. I think it was Papa John's or Papa Murphy's, I don't even remember, and Kinko's, and then the HVAC, so heating and cooling units on top. The power requirements, especially in FedEx for all their copiers, they needed a lot of power, right? And so Caribou needs water for, making their colored water, so or coffee. And so there was certain requirements for each tenant, and just kind of figuring those out. And those are in the landlord work letters that they require and how you deliver it. And we got done, and he was just like, okay, how much is this going to cost? And, and I'm like, well, I think it was like $1.5 million or something to do the building. And he goes, okay, we need 20% equity. And I'm like, okay, all right. So what's that? And I'm like, okay, $300,000. And he's like, well, how much money do you have? And I go, 30. And then I'm like, okay. He goes, well, what do I own? What do you own? And then I go, I own 10 and you own 90%. And he goes, you feel good about that? And I go, yeah. And he goes, oh, you got a lot to learn. You got a lot to learn. He goes, you put the deal together, you found the site. And so we ended up doing this deal, and he ended up putting almost all that money in for me. So, and he said we're going to be 50-50 partners, even though I only had 10%, so he put in my 40.
Wow.
And it wasn't a loan, and he just said, listen, you owe me now. And he smiled, which he did, and which I did, I should say. And, 20, 30, 40 buildings later, we're still partners with that same company. So, it was kind of like, hey, I'll teach you this game, you little snot-nosed kid that doesn't have a business degree, and we'll figure it out together. And so, yeah, we're building a lot of buildings right now.
You can't be good at this business and not be a good judge of character. He knew what he was working with.
Probably, but I also knew he was a good guy. That's a good story. I don't think he knows that I'd ever told that to anybody. So it's kind of fun to do it on the podcast. But it's about giving back, right? And so if not for that, I probably wouldn't have stayed at Welsh, and I probably would have gone to one of those larger developers, because I almost did that early 2000s, I'd say. I had probably more than 4 and less than 6 offers to go and be at a full-service developer, because that was interesting, because a developer, you're working with land and trying to figure out where to put the pieces and financial side of it. And then you have construction people within the department and the company, and I thought that that's what I would like. But he convinced me that I could do it without a big company. We could do it on our own, and that, yeah, I have to be the developer, the construction guy, and the person that executes, and the broker, and the. But now I'm just not a one-trick pony. I might not be great at all of them, but I'm serviceable at most of them, and it's funner to do it for yourself and your family and as a partner than, again, just having one aspect of it at one of these large firms. And it's nothing against the large firms, but it has been a fun journey.
Well, and it kept you at Welsh for like 25 years.
Yeah,
right?
So yep, and that's a good point, because Welsh allowed us to, invest and didn't have any problems as long as you were honest with the client. And especially that example that Kinko's, they pointed to that. Or you really look at John's developments with Circuit City in town. Circuit City go by that, at France 44, it was a former landfill, and then it was a drive-in movie theater.
It was.
And so he redeveloped that, but his clients asked him to do that. So it was cheaper for their clients. It was good for John, and he learned a lot, and he was able to pass a lot of those things on to me. But yeah, that was fun. But then doing development, doing brokerage, you try to at least think you master that, and then you can move on to other things like investing and retail concepts, which didn't work out too well. But yeah, no, I've done.
Well, you've dabbled in those retail concepts, so you've and probably more than dabbled, right? Owning actually being the user.
Yeah, no, I got into sports clips maybe 14 years ago. That was painful. Nothing against sports clips, but it's just pandemic really affected retail, as you know, Lisa. And so I was into that, and then a local restaurant company chain called Lucky 13 Pub, and I think we did 5 of those. There was a total of 16 in the company. And then I got into Smash Burgers. They were based out of Denver. So I think I had 16 or 18 of those, and it was 18 sports clubs, 16 Smash Burgers, and then I was part of a greater group of Lucky 13 restaurants of maybe 15. So that's sit-down restaurants, more fast food or quick service, and then discount here. And what I liked about that, Lisa, it was different because, like I said, I am ADHD, and if I'm curious, George, and I want to figure out something, I thought that was the ultimate in business. I got bored of just being in the car and being a glorified taxi driver. Remember I said a glorified pilot, and I'm like, so I got sick of it. I kind of mastered it in my, at least in my own mind. Maybe people think I'm crazy, but anyways, I was good at getting people in the car and getting deals done on the tenant rep side. And then I got decent at developing, but then I was like, hey, buildings can't talk, and that simple, buildings can't talk was in my own mind, right? And I was like, God, it'd be great to go in and see, our manager or bartender or the girls cutting the hair, or the guys flipping the burgers at Smash Burger, and then there's a relationship there, and so it was fun. Sports clips, we'd get out Minneapolis, which is a large body of water here outside the Twin Cities. We'd get a big boat, and we'd have all of our stylists out there, and we'd have a year-end awards. And that was just fun because you saw it grow. We had one location, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then assistant managers are getting promoted to managers, and then the new assistant managers or our top stylist wants to be a manager someday, so she comes in and slides into there. And there's a lot of kind of, I guess, fun energy with that. So that was really fun during the pandemic. Minnesota was overly cautious, I'll say, in terms of closing down like our whole state. And our great governor that somehow got reelected really put the screws to, everything. I'm talking about schools, businesses, everything. Staying out of the politics of George Floyd and everything else, but just staying on just the shutdowns of restaurants, haircut places. People were massively impacted, and people changed their habits too. People that went to happy hours every day at restaurants, now maybe not doing that as much. Maybe they're not going out as frequently. Maybe they're not going out as late. And so it did affect people's being shut down that long habits. Maybe it was good that they're not doing happy hour as much. But also in terms of people working at those establishments, they had to find other jobs because, they were a stylist, that's what they do, that's what they love, and they had their clients, but they also had to feed their families. And so they might have got into going into construction or working in the back office somewhere or going to work at a church or whatever, and they never came back. And so that's what you're seeing that, you've heard about it in Minnesota, the labor shortage is really tough. And if you go to one of our haircut places, you might have to wait 2 hours to get a haircut. But it's not because we're really good at haircuts, it's because out of those 6 or 8 chairs, we only have 2 stylists there cutting hair, and we used to have 4 or 5, and so that impacts the NOI and everything else. But it was a great run until St. Patty's Day when Mr. Walz, our governor, shut everything down. March 17th of 2020, and then things did not so good, and they haven't recovered, those businesses now. Do you blame China for that, or Biden, or Walz, or Trump? Not really. It's just a 100-year pandemic, and you just got to move on. But did I have fun doing that, Lisa? I did. Do I regret it? No. And because I lost a significant amount of dough, but it was also made me a better broker because I could understand from the real estate's perspective, you got to do this deal. Mr. PetSmart or Mr. Total Wine, or Mr. whoever you're in the car with, because of here's all the demographics or the traffic or the income in the area, right? But you didn't have a connection. But it's fun, again, when you're a part of it, you understood it's hard to get employees. It's hard to retain employees. You have to do things like boat rides and make people feeling good. And there is a whole other side of the business that I was able to, I guess, learn from, even though it was financially muy painful. But anyways, it was good. I don't again, I don't blame anybody or any politics on as it relates to how the pandemic started. Might blame our governor on keeping us shut down that long when North and South Dakota and Iowa and Wisconsin are wide open. But it is what it is, water under the bridge, and we just got to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So moving forward, not only did you have all this going on with the pandemic, but you also moved companies with right before the pandemic, and that was a big move.
Yeah, no, that was fun. That was fun. So you've
got a great team.
Yeah, we had a great team, and I didn't want to leave Welsh, but Welsh was acquired by Colliers, and Colliers is a huge international company. They're probably rated out of the top 10, 5 or 6. CBRE and JLL are the top 2. I think it goes Cushman and Wakefield and Newmark and maybe Avis and Young, but they're all kind of those other middle 3 or 4 are all about the same. But with that, you have a different culture, and the culture of the company I was at was more, to do Star Wars analogy, was more Darth Vader, the Empire, and guys kind of shucking and jiving, and we had a local owner, which was Dennis Doyle, which was legendary crazy man, and so, when your CEO is crazy and fun, and let's get after it, and, can't remember anyone's name. I think he called me Tim for 15 years. And even when I was his top agent out of 80, he'd go, Tim, you're killing it. And I'd be like, oh, God, Dennis. Anyways.
Oh, that's so
yeah, hey, Tim, you're killing it. And I'm like, all right, dude. Anyways, but he was fun, right? And we had 350 employees, if I recall. We had construction and everything else. But, just like everything, in retail and in commercial real estate and in business, things change. We talked about, earlier, phone books, and then now you had, flip phones, and then you had, the one with the ball. What's that one you had?
Oh, the BlackBerry. BlackBerry
that you missed, yeah. And now you have iPhones and Androids or whatever the heck the kids have nowadays. But things progressed, and in commercial real estate, it's progressed too. And so it's not as much of a cowboy type of an area that it might have been in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And now it's just, I guess it's more inviting for all groups, all races, women especially, and I think that's good for the industry, and these international companies are buying up the local ones. And so anyways, getting back to Welsh, 25 years was great, but it was just a different culture, and the culture didn't fit me and what I like to do, and I needed a little bit more freedom. So yeah, I went to Transwestern, which is also national, but it's private, and they're not chasing the stock price, and so I'm glad I did that. And I got to work with 2 good friends of mine, Mike Salmon, that is kind of the majority owner, and then Greg Munson too, which I'd known. They're about my age. Greg's a year or 2 younger, and Mike's a year or 2 older. But I respect them, and they had a smaller shop and a smaller footprint, so it worked well. But it allowed me, that platform, to answer your question, to continue to invest in, haircut places, burger places, restaurants, and then do some development stuff on the side. But I still like to do my brokerage. I mean, that's kind of how I started, and my passion, and kind of figuring out the chessboard and where the next Total Wine needs to be, or the next, at the time, Caribou Coffee. It's still what I like to do. But no, Welsh was awesome, and Colliers is a good company. It's just different, and different strokes for different folks, and I needed to do something different. So I've been at Transwestern for 3 years, and again, I went from, I think at the height, 80 brokers to a company that might have had 15, and I think we have like 30 now. So it's, they're growing it, and just a little bit more entrepreneurial, and that's good for a squirrely guy like me. So that gives me a little bit more room.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So what do you think are things that contribute to your success?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to have your own style. And, I think I talked about how John was, triple major, Madison, Grass Camp School of Smart Real Estate Professionals, and I went to the University of North Dakota. So you could say, what's the difference? And it's like, I think it's an internal drive, but also being honest with your clients, and don't worry about any one deal. Just kind of present all the options, recommend an option to try to corral them, because they're not from the state. When they come into town, they need to have something. You can, instead of saying 10 different options, what do you think? Just like, hey, here are the 10 options. Here's how I rate them. What do you think? That's a different way of doing it. But being direct and honest, and then not worrying about the money aspect of it, because most of our brokers are on commission base, and so if you don't do a deal, you don't make any money. And so some people might take liberties, and you just don't do that. But once you get your brand or your shtick or whatever it is, and you're known as honest, hardworking, people will gravitate to you. And I don't care if you're John Yacht at Cushman Wakefield, or Lisa Christensen at Christensen Comedies, or any number of, Abe Appert over at CBRE is known as the king of multifamily or apartments. Once you have that kind of, reputation or whatever.
Like you said, brand.
Yeah, I think of it brand. And it usually grows nationally too, where then you get recommendations like, maybe it's a car wash or whatever that's coming to town, and somebody talks to somebody and they'll look you up and go, oh, he does this and this and this. You call this guy, then they'll call and say, hey, Mr. Total Wine guy or Alta guy or PetSmart guy or whoever guy, and say, hey, what do you think of this guy, Chris Simmons? And they're, oh, he's either good or bad, and hopefully they're saying it's good.
Right.
But that when they call you, they're really not interviewing anybody else, because your own guys have said you're the guy or the gal in the town. So I think, don't worry about the dough when you first get in. Ask questions. Whatever they said in school, there's never such thing as a dumb question, but so ask questions, and especially your clients. I noticed that was interesting. When I got in the car with Mr. Einstein Bagels or Mr. Boston Market, they knew I didn't know crap. And so I was like, I think there's a good location. And then they'd be like, well, let me tell you, kid, how it works. And especially when you're young, they're more than happy to kind of try to pattern or throw some advice on you. And I like doing that same too. And giving back is kind of big. And I just recognized that when I was in the car and I didn't know what I was doing, where they would say, maybe you need to do this or that, and maybe the book needs to be a little better for the next tour, and all those things you learn. And then giving back is a huge thing too, because they gave to me, you have to give back. So, I was asked by my Arby's guy that retired, and Doug Kennedy, and he said, will you teach at Stout? And I think I did it for one. I might have done it I did it once, and then I ended up doing it for 5 or 7 years, teaching brokerage basics there, and then I did it for MinCar, and then I do talks all the time for different organizations like X-Team and Realty Resources, and you just get on that kind of circuit, talking nationally or regionally, and you kind of again work on your brand. But the brand is because you worked hard on your clients, you got things done. And you can be really polished like John, or you can be squirrely like me, and everyone's going to have their opinions on what's better or worse, but it doesn't matter. The client wants to get the deal, and if they get the deal, then you get paid. But how you build a brand is honesty and outworking everybody else. It doesn't matter if you went to North Dakota or Notre Dame. If you get deals done and you get that brand out there and you got a good reputation, you're going to crush it. And that's every single product type, from being Mr. Abe Appert at CBRE, and him and I lived together for 5 years, took CCIM together.
You did?
And we were two snot-nosed kids. He was 2 years younger. I was 23, 24. He was 21. And he's the man now. And so, but he got his shtick, when we were learning together. But we had two great mentors. So not about the company. It's about the mentor. And it's about outworking your competition, not what school went to, not even what degree you got. Some of the top guys in town I know that are history majors, so you don't have to go to Notre Dame or Wisconsin School of Grass Camp or whatever it's called. You're gonna be successful if you just stay true to yourself, get your own style, and outwork everybody. Out hustle them, just like you do.
Yes, there's something about that drive that just gets you out of bed. I mean, you're one of the few people that I know that beats me to the computer on many days.
Yeah.
You're up early.
I am up early, but I also have a balance too. I got 4 kids, and I got up early and got my day settled, probably when it's quiet, because I got so much run through my head. But I was able to communicate with my clients on the East Coast before they got to the office, especially, West Mountain and West Coast. So I could look at, and depending on where that retailer was based, if it was, Total Wines broker, national broker in Phoenix, or if it was, somebody on the East Coast, Dress Barn at the time that I was working with, I could have all my questions or emails out. Hey, where are we at on that deal? Where are we at on that lease? Hey, when are you coming to town? Where's that meeting we're going to have at Assessi? I could have that kind of communications to my, at the time might have been only 5, now it's 20, out so that the rest of the day I can be on the phone talking to you, meaning Lisa, about deals and what's going on, what can we do together, and kind of, I guess shucking and jiving, because that's what it is. It's still a people business, right?
Right.
And if I got my emails done in the morning and I got my tour books going, I was able to kind of have a better success at, gabbing, if you will, during the day. But also leave at 3 o'clock and get back to my 4 young kids, or at the time they were young, and try to be as good a dad as I can be. I think, again, it gets into hard work, and it's like getting used to getting up early. But it wasn't like I started that. But, Scott Frederickson and Bill Ritter were the top 2 industrial guys probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. Bill's probably still top revenue guy in town. They're at Welsh, now it's Collier's. And they would get it. They'd be in the office at 4:30 and 5 every day, the 2 of them. Me and not knowing anything. I said, I'm going to get in there half an hour earlier. And it had nothing to do with my mentor didn't do that. He worked late at night and then would come in kind of, 8 o'clock or so. But getting in early kind of was setting the tone that, out of the 80 brokers, I'm going to be the first one there, and I'm going to hopefully do really well. And so, again, there's an internal, an internal want to be good or great at what you do, and then but it's about putting in the time.
You've done that.
Well, I hope so. I've enjoyed it. I love getting up in the morning and still rocking and rolling and getting to know different people, and it's fun. It's a great business. And what Peter Mork said, I think we're towards the end now, of every day is different. That is what's fun. And if I would have stayed at Pitney Bowes, I would have been selling meter machines, and probably. And but if I would have stayed in the military, I'd probably still be a pilot. I'd still probably done for sure. I would have been Bosnia and Herzegovina, and can't even pronounce it, but Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and I probably would have enjoyed being in combat zones, dropping. I would have been flying C-130s, and so it's funny how the life kind of changes, but I also would have been doing the same thing every day, generally flying a plane. And again, in commercial real estate, having a developer hat on, or tenant rep hat, or landlord rep, or an investor hat, or
a retailer hat,
yeah, or haircut place hat, or restaurant hat. Every day is different. So I thank Peter Mork for telling me to get out of selling mail metering machines. So it worked out okay.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know we could talk forever, but our time is up here.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it.
So
really had a fun
much.
time, and best of luck with the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That was awesome.